Ever imagine trading like your comfortable life,
Yeah.
for a tough journey at sea?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's exactly what this guy Richard Henry Dana Jr. did back in 1834.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what we're diving into today
Okay.
with 2 Years Before the Mast.
All right.
It's his book, and it's based on this really cool retro rewind podcast episode I found.
Okay.
So picture this. It's like the 1800s, right?
Yeah.
Instead of hitting the books at Harvard, Dana just decides to ship out as a
Ouch.
common sailor.
What a change.
Yeah, talk about a big life decision.
Yeah. That's pretty wild. It's a fascinating choice, especially for someone like him coming from such a privileged background.
Right.
What could have made him do something like that?
So get this. It was actually measles that messed up his eyesight.
Oh, wow.
Easels, can you believe that?
Wow.
Leading to a 2-year sea voyage.
Wow.
This wasn't just a quick trip, though. Dana sailed from Boston all the way to California
Wow.
on this ship called the Pilgrim. And during that same time, the U.S. was changing like crazy.
Yeah.
Industrialization, westward expansion, and people were starting to notice social injustices more and more.
Right.
But life at sea was like a whole different world.
Yeah.
Brutal,
Hmm.
and most people just ignored it, especially the kind of society that Dana came from.
Yeah, totally.
That's what makes this deep dive so interesting, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely.
He wasn't some, tough sailor. He was a Harvard student.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing all this for the first time,
Yeah.
like a real insider-outsider perspective.
Totally.
What really stood out to you about his reasons for going on this journey?
Well, even though the measles thing was what got him going, I think Dana was also feeling kind of disillusioned with his cushy life.
Okay.
He wanted something more, a challenge, and to connect with something real, something far away from, those fancy Harvard classrooms.
You can really see that in his book. He doesn't hold back on the tough conditions aboard that ship.
Really?
Like, he talks about brutal floggings being totally normal,
Oh my God.
even for tiny mistakes. And there was hardly any medical care. Like, he mentions this one sailor who was just suffering from scurvy,
Oh no.
and they barely did anything for him.
Oh, that's awful.
That's a pretty rough picture of what those sailors went through.
Yeah.
That's why 2 Years Before the Mast is so much more than some adventure story.
Oh yeah, I getcha.
It's like a social commentary showing the dark side of this whole system that just used those guys.
Right. Yeah.
So we have Dana, this Harvard scholar, thrown into this super harsh world. What do you think he learned from all of it? And how did it change him?
Well, besides the obvious, the physical and mental stuff, he really came to appreciate how tough those sailors were and how they all stuck together.
Right.
Despite everything, they were really close, supported each other through it all.
Yeah.
That really affected Dana. It shaped how he thought about social justice and respecting everyone, no matter who they were.
Yeah. The way he describes going around Cape Horn, terrifying,
Mm-hmm.
but also exciting. You really feel how dangerous it was, but also the skill they needed to make it through those waters.
Absolutely. That's what makes his writing so good, He captures both sides.
Yeah.
The beauty and the brutal reality of being at sea.
It's not sugar-coated at all.
No, not at all. You can almost feel the wind and taste the salt when he talks about the storms and sailing the ship.
And what's amazing is that he used all that, his experience, to speak up for change. 2 years before the Mast didn't just sit there, it started a movement.
Really?
People finally noticed how badly those sailors were treated, and it pushed for changes in the whole industry.
Wow, that's powerful.
He also gives this unique view of California when it was still under Mexican rule.
Right.
Back then, it was totally different from the California we know now. He writes about all the cultures he saw, the missions and the rancheros. But he also saw the tension building between the Mexican government and all the Americans moving in.
Interesting.
It's almost like he's hinting at the conflict that would make California part of the U.S.
Yeah.
His observations are a valuable piece of history, showing a region right on the edge of huge changes.
Yeah, like a snapshot in time.
Adventure, social commentary, and a peek into a turning point in history. It's wild how much Dana packed into this one book.
I know, right?
But it's more than just a cool history lesson.
Yeah, right.
What makes this story relevant to us today, almost 200 years later?
Yeah. I think Dana's story still matters today because it shows us what happens when we leave our comfort zones and challenge the way things are.
Yeah.
He could have just stayed at Harvard and followed the path laid out for him.
Right.
But he didn't.
Yeah, he chose something totally different, something that made him face hard truths about the world and about himself.
Exactly.
That's what makes him so interesting, right? He didn't just sit back and watch injustice happen. He used his position and his voice to fight for change.
Yeah.
It makes you think we all have a responsibility to speak up against inequality, even when it's tough. But I'm curious, what did he actually do to help those sailors? Did his book really make a difference?
Oh, yeah, for sure. 2 years before the Mast really got things moving for changes in the maritime industry.
Really?
Before his book, nobody really knew what those sailors were going through.
Yeah.
But his descriptions of their suffering, the floggings, the terrible food, the lack of safety, it outraged people and made them demand action.
So it wasn't just a good story, it actually improved the lives of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's incredible. What kind of changes happened because of his book?
Well, for one, it led to laws that limited corporal punishment on ships.
Oh, wow.
Dana himself became a lawyer and kept fighting for sailors' rights, pushing for better working conditions and fair treatment.
Good for him.
And his book also helped people understand how dangerous scurvy was, which led to better food on ships and adding citrus fruits to prevent the disease.
It's amazing that one book could have such a big impact.
It really is.
It makes you realize how powerful storytelling can be,
Yeah.
how it can connect us to experiences we've never had and inspire us to take action.
Right.
But switching gears a bit, I was also really interested in his observations of California when it was still under Mexican rule.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned earlier that it was like a snapshot of a region on the verge of big changes. What details stood out to you about his time there?
What's fascinating is that Dana gives us this glimpse into a world that was about to disappear.
Yeah.
He talks about the huge ranchos, the missions, the mix of Spanish, Mexican, and indigenous cultures.
It was a real melting pot back then.
Yeah, it was. He talks about the beautiful landscapes, all the wildlife, but he also hints at the growing tensions, all those American settlers coming in and the cracks starting to show in Mexican control.
Right.
He even saw one of the first uprisings against the Mexican government.
It's like he's documenting a lost world, a time that would be completely changed by what happened next.
Exactly.
And to think, he experienced all this in his early 20s.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
And what's remarkable is that he doesn't just observe, he thinks deeply about it all.
Yeah.
He wrestles with his own prejudices, his ideas about the people and cultures he meets. He learns Spanish and immerses himself in the local customs and makes real connections with people from all walks of life.
I love that about his writing. It's not just about adventure. It's about growing as a person and discovering who you are.
Absolutely.
He's always challenging his own worldview, struggling with complex issues of race, class, and power.
Right.
And he admits his own mistakes and biases.
He does.
He talks about how skeptical he was of the Mexican people at first, how he saw them through his own cultural lens.
Yeah.
But through spending time with them, going through tough times together, he starts to see their humanity, their strength, and their own unique struggles.
It's a powerful transformation.
It reminds me of that quote from Mark Twain, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness."
Dana's journey, both literally and figuratively, really embodies that idea. By experiencing different cultures and ways of life, he broadens his understanding of the world and of himself.
Definitely.
But what I find really amazing is how he weaves these complex ideas into such vivid storytelling.
Right.
He doesn't preach. He invites the reader to experience these discoveries along with him.
Exactly.
That's what makes 2 Years Before the Mast such a timeless book.
Yeah.
It's not just a history book or a social commentary. It's a deeply human story, one that continues to challenge and inspire us today.
It really does.
It reminds us how powerful it can be to step outside our comfort zones, question our assumptions, and embrace the richness and complexity of the world.
Absolutely.
So as we move into the last part of our deep dive, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Dana's story is full of adventure and social impact, but it's also about personal transformation.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest takeaway from his journey? What can we learn from his experience, both as individuals and as a society?
That's a tough one, but I think one of the most powerful takeaways from Dana's journey is the importance of empathy.
Okay. He went into this whole thing with certain ideas about sailors, about people from different cultures, even about the world itself.
Right.
But going through those experiences with them, those hardships they all faced together,
Yeah.
he learned to see the world from their perspective,
Right.
He recognized their humanity, their struggles, their hopes and dreams,
Yeah.
and that changed him.
It's like he's saying you can't really understand something unless you've lived it,
Yeah.
unless you step outside your own bubble and connect with others on a deeper level.
Right.
It makes you wonder, what are the Cape Horns in our own lives? What experiences push us to challenge our own beliefs and really open our minds?
Exactly. It's easy to stay in our comfort zone, surrounded by people who think like us.
Yeah.
But Dana's story shows us that real growth, personal and societal, comes from those times when we're uncomfortable.
Right.
From those moments that make us question everything we thought we knew and expand our understanding of the world.
It's like that saying, the journey is the destination. It's not just about the end goal.
Yeah.
It's about how we change along the way.
Right.
The lessons we learn, the people we meet, the way our perspectives shift.
Yeah.
Dana may have started his voyage to fix his eyesight,
Right.
but he came back with a whole new way of seeing everything.
And he shared that vision with everyone through his writing.
Yeah.
He didn't just write down what happened. He thought about it, deeply wrestled with what it all meant, and used it to fight for a fairer society.
That's something we can all learn from.
Definitely.
We each have our own stories to tell our own unique perspectives, and those stories can connect us, inspire us, and even spark real change. So it's not enough to just read Dana's story and admire his bravery.
Right.
It's about finding that courage within ourselves,
Yeah.
being willing to step outside our comfort zones, to challenge the way things are, and to use our voices to make the world a better place.
Absolutely. It's a powerful message, don't you think?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into 2 years before the Mast,
Mm.
I want to leave you with this. What adventures are waiting for you? What challenges are you ready to face? And how will you use your experiences to make a difference?
Dana's journey shows us that anything is possible if we're brave enough to set sail and explore the unknown.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.
Thanks for listening.